Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Julia Oshwald, and I'm delighted to serve as your worship associate today and to welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all you are bringing with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We welcome all of you. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us. Guests are warmly invited to attend the Inquirer's session today, immediately after the service in the parlor, to learn more about Unitarian Universalism and our church in a smaller, casual gathering. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. You can also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary. Hearing assist devices and Braille hymnals are also available at the rear of the sanctuary, and a fragrance-free area is located on the front right side of the sanctuary. If you are a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages, please join the children's recessional and head across the hall to the common room. There you will be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. Again, my name is Julia, and you can come talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to a few. Our forum speaker this morning is Dr. Vincent Smith, presenting on relativity and the twin paradox. Your First Church stewardship teams are thanking you this Sunday with deep appreciation and glorious Gloriosos cookies. Members of Feast for Funds, Pledge, Income Opportunity, and our heritage teams will be mingling with trays during coffee hour. Guests, members, and friends alike are all encouraged to indulge in a small treat and our huge gratitude for this beloved community. Join UU singer-songwriter John Stano for an evening of original acoustic music on Saturday, March 23rd at 7 p.m. in Max Auto Hall, as we celebrate the release of his studio album, Digging Out in the Heartland, plus a live recording, John Stano Live at the South Shore Farmers Market. While there is no charge to attend, an RSVP is preferred. Please find details on these and more events in the announcements insert. Finally, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. At this point, I'd like to call up Dale Skaggs to light the chalice.
Our opening words this morning are adapted from Jack Gilbert's A Brief for the Defense. Sorrow everywhere, grief everywhere. But we enjoy our lives because that's what love wants. Otherwise, the mornings before summer dawn would not be made so fine. The women at the fountain are laughing together between the suffering they have known and that in their future, smiling and laughing, while someone in the village is very sick. If we deny our happiness, we lessen the importance of our loss. We must risk delight. We must have the stubbornness to accept our gladness in the ruthless furnace of this world. We must admit there will be music despite everything. We stand at the prow again of a small ship anchored late at night in the tiny port looking over to the sleeping island. The waterfront is 3 shuttered cafes and 1 naked light burning. To hear the faint sound of oars in the silence as a rowboat comes slowly out and then goes back is truly worth all the years of sorrow. Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us in our opening hymn, number 354, We Laugh. And as part of my ministry of moving away from perfectionism, I would like to tell you that your order of service is wrong about this next moment. Consider it a teaser for next week's service. This week, however, we will have Pat McFarland now sharing a stewardship testimonial with us.
Good morning, everyone. I am so honored to be here with you, you brave people who risk walking on the sidewalks. Ours is a self-sustaining church. What we are able to do or not do is totally up to us. What we pledge to this beloved community makes a difference. And so when I was asked to help close the gap, to fund our work for social justice, and to pay our wonderful staff worthy wages, I increased my pledge. Because I've benefited from working 4 decades at MATC with a strong AFT Local 212, I have been able to say yes. My story is now of a 70-year-old activist who loves democracy-driven, bottoms-up, grassroots movement. I began when I was 12 years old, when I joined other Irish Catholics to help get out the vote for John F. Kennedy. My childhood priest was punished for his labor organizing in South Bend, Indiana, and lucky for me, he was sent to my parish in conservative Watertown, Wisconsin. His mentoring would inspire me to organize 3 unions in my life, including the first Union of Child Care Workers in Wisconsin. My priest encouraged my mom to let me move to Chicago in the summer of '66, where I could fight segregation and march with Martin Luther King. Now, these evening marches were nonviolent, and they were my first. My world changed when 700 white counter-protesters showered us with rocks, hatred, and hostility. We linked arms and we moved forward. After many years with powerful experiences as a deeply committed Catholic, I quit when my religion did not sustain me as I opposed the war in Vietnam. Later, I joined an organization that relied on democratic centralism, and sadly, I resigned with deep concerns, questions, and doubts. But then I found Unitarian Universalism, and you have never forced me to accept one truth. I am challenged here. You have always supported me when I share my concerns, questions, and doubts, and I won't be resigning. For 4 decades, you have nurtured 3 generations of my family. I am a woman of faith, but yet a woman of interfaith. I proudly represent you on the cabinet of the Interfaith Conference, an organization that brings together people of different faiths to work at the intersection of race, class, and the environment. Have you tried our amazing faith dinners? Are you joining us for the March lunches here at church? Social action indeed is the lifeblood of this church. I love our Black Lives Matter banner and our Black Lives Matter to Wisconsin UU group addresses racial disparities and works with friends like Reggie Jackson to dive deeper into our anti-racism work. Seeking environmental justice, in 1982, I joined many other Unitarian Universalists at the largest anti-nuclear protest in American history. How glorious to unite with 1 million people demonstrating in New York City Central Park. And last month, our group explored the Earth Justice book, and I wanted to hold it up. Nick, will you stand up and hold up Jennifer's book? And this is a book that inspires action and gives us strategies. I'll find it later and hold it up when I sit down. And it's co-edited by our wonderful and talented minister. Are you part of the food justice movement? He's got the book, and we sell it in the book rack here. Are you part of the food justice movement? Learn about power and privilege in the food system. Join a food co-op such as Outpost, where I'm serving as your representative and an advocate for living wages. When we have a need to express our hope for the world, this justice-seeking community is here for us. The Social Justice Council helps us find ways to bring hope into action. Our congregation's membership in multi-faith groups such as Common Ground and Micah help us connect with others in our city who also have hope. Find a social justice group that is hopeful for you at our table during the coffee hour. When we have a need, this welcoming community is here for us. Last week, we filled our church and stood together with the Lutke family, listening to brave parents celebrate the life and grieve the loss of baby B. Grace. Together, our congregation sang, "Blessed Spirit of my life, give me strength through stress and strife." When there is a need, this community shows up in the spirit of life and love and giving each other strength. We have shown up for the rights of workers, civil rights, international issues, working for peace, women's rights, earth justice, immigration, standing up for children to keep families together, supporting affordable quality childcare and public education. Let's keep working together, empowering our spirit and healing our world. Years ago, I joined the Heritage Society at this church, and this church is in the Pat McFarland estate plan. Planned giving helps our congregation in future years. Thank you for being here, my brave friends, for turning in your pledge, and for showing up in the spirit of life and love for our movement.
We'd like to invite children and teachers to join in singing, there's the book, to join in singing verse 1 of the children's recessional hymn and then proceed to classes as the congregation continues to sing you on your way. Will you please rise now, embody your spirit, and join in children's recessional hymn number 348, Guide My Feet. I'm sorry to share with you the news that 2 members of our congregation have died this week. Phil Martin died peacefully on Sunday morning, March 3rd, with his wife Jean holding his hand. Phil traveled his cancer journey for almost 2 years, and he died after a very brief stay in hospice. He was 65 years old and a member of our congregation for 6 years. A memorial service celebrating Phil's life will be held on Saturday, March 23rd at 2 p.m. here at First Church, with Reverend Dina officiating and a reception immediately following in the Leanhouse Common Room. Betty Zillman died peacefully on Friday morning, March 8th, 2019, at her home. Betty died following a fall at home 2 weeks ago. She was either 93 or 94 years old. She didn't want anyone to know. And she had been a member of First Church for decades. Betty did not wish to have a memorial service, but she welcomed memorial gifts in her memory to either Goodwill Industries or First Church. Today, the parlor will be available from 12 until 1 for anyone who would like to gather there and share stories about Betty and connect with one another. Thus, as is our tradition in this congregation, whenever we have a birth, an adoption, or a death among our members, we light our candle of life. Today, in honor of Phil Martin and Betty Zillman. Will you join me now in a time of contemplation, followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. So bring your attention to your body. Feel those sit bones and your feet grounding you. And the top of your head connecting you to all that is. Let your breath bring you into being here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Comfort the mourning this morning. Bring courage to those who are afraid. Return us to our best selves, so that we may do this for each other again and again, supporting, celebrating, persevering, loving through all the trials of life. May it be so.
The year I lived in American Samoa, my favorite thing to do after a day at school was to go snorkeling. My house was just a 30-second walk to the beach, and there were reefs filled with brilliant fish just a few yards into the water. I spent many afternoons playing in that water alone and with friends. One such afternoon, I was walking down the only road in my village to my friend's house so that we could go swimming there together. I noticed a crowd of folks from my village gathered near the water, so I walked over to see what was happening. The closer I drew to the group of people, the more unease I felt. I saw people clutching each other in terrified embraces. I heard sobbing. I approached carefully and asked a neighbor on the outskirts of the group what was happening. 2 children from my village, one in middle school and one in high school, were drowning. They had been playing and floating in the water right where I always snorkeled. Floating on their backs and unaware of the tide, they were sucked into the channel between the 2 coral reefs and drawn out into the open ocean. They did not know how to swim. They had begun to scream, and a villager had heard them and ran for help. 3 young men from our village had thrown on their fins and ran to the rescue. When I arrived, they were just reaching the children and beginning to pull them to safety. They had to swim with them all the way around the reefs and into the dock, where it was safe to get out without the current pulling them under. The group of us slowly followed them along the shore as they progressed toward the harbor. We walked, watching in terror and gratitude as we witnessed their lives being saved, shaken to our core. Amongst the group of us was the high schooler's father, absolutely beside himself the entire time. The 2 children were pulled from the water into their families' loving arms and taken back home to rest. The 3 men who had saved them were all friends of mine, so I debriefed with them as we walked back to the village. I remarked to one of them that the girl's father had been near me in the group of onlookers, too terrified to speak. My friend commented, "What kind of father is he that he wouldn't jump in to save his own daughter?" "The kind of father who doesn't know how to swim either," I replied. On the one hand, I understood my friend's disbelief and outrage to hear that her father was there all along as he saved this girl. On the other hand, I knew that this father had made the best and only decision he knew how to in that moment: to pray, to put his complete trust in his community, to allow someone else to help him do the only thing in the world that mattered to him at that moment, and the one thing he could not do himself. As a large man who also could not swim, I'm sure he recognized that jumping in that forbidding ocean would have made the task of the men who had set out to rescue his daughter much harder. He would have become a liability, another person to save, and in doing so, decrease the odds that his daughter would be safely brought to shore. I could not imagine being put in his shoes. The thought of it kept me awake for days on end. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the father had done the very best thing he could do for his daughter in that moment. He had recognized his capacity, done what he could, and entrusted his community to help him do the rest. He had known his role was not out there in that water. It was with his wife on shore, praying and holding her hands. There had been and would be other days in which he would protect and care for his daughter, but he had had the profound courage and selflessness to allow someone else to fill that role for him when he could not. I can't imagine a wiser or deeper love than that.
We're all in this boat together. Sometimes it's our turn to jump in the water, and sometimes it's our turn to stand on deck and clasp the hands of the ones that we love and pray. In her essay, Kindred Memory, Unitarian Universalist minister Reverend Ruth Mackenzie writes of a miniature 16th century ship that hangs from the ceiling of every Danish church. In the Danish tradition, the ship is meant to symbolize this one unarguable fact: we are all in this boat together. And the Danes hang the ship not above the chancel or the pulpit, but over the body of the congregation, to remind us that we're sitting side by side in the boat together, and we're meant to put our oars in the water and pull in mutual effort. The storms may be mighty, the waves rough and frighteningly high, but we are meant to navigate this life together. Last week, a 40-year-old gay man in Chicago shared the following story. I used to manage an LGBT bookstore, back when bookstores were still a thing. One night, someone called the store and said he thought he might be gay, and he was considering self-harm. Our bookstore was not a crisis center. I didn't have any training, but it's where the person knew to call. And so I figured as long as we're talking, he's safe, right? So I talked to this guy, and I answer his questions, and I try to be encouraging, and I'm maybe sounding a little bit frantic, and I'm definitely ignoring the 4 or 5 customers who are also in the store. And then one of them puts her hand on my shoulder and asks for the phone. "My turn," she says, and takes it. In 2018, the American Journal of Preventative Medicine published a study that showed LGBTQ youth and young adults are more likely to consider self-harm and suicide than their heterosexual peers. That same study also showed that being religious decreased suicidality among heterosexual youth. For every increase in the importance of religion in a young straight person's life, there was a 17% reduction in suicide attempts, suggesting that religion might help protect against suicide for straight youth. However, for every increase in the importance of religion to LGBTQ youth, suicidal ideation increased. Now, this study did not ask any questions about whether the religion's theology was queer affirming or not. However, I have seen the evidence in our Unitarian Universalist youth, both in this congregation and all over the country, of the positive, life-saving effects of our queer-affirming theology and queer-affirming education in our whole lives. What we believe and what we do as religious people matters. It makes a difference in the lives of those who are already in the boat with us. And it matters to people who are out there looking for us but haven't found us yet. Because just as we steward this ship for those who come after us, our ancestors built the boat that we're sailing in now. Our congregation was founded in 1842, at least 3 generations before any of us were born, and 7 generations before our youngest members joined us here. We have the privilege of being here because of the faithful stewardship of people who did this for us before we were even born. Over 175 years, hundreds of different people have built and grown what it means to be a member of this church, a member of this boat full of people rowing together through waves and storms on the mighty sea. Each of us has a role here, a place to put our oars in the water and pull. That role will change, and it will need to be spelled from time to time by others who give us rest. But by working together, each of us in our own role of the moment, we are stronger, more resilient, and can make more of a difference in the world. Last week, our youth shared with us their varying journeys with identity. Most of their time at church so far has been steeped in studenting, in being students here, but in last week's service, they shifted into a new role, teaching. Our youth taught me about the relationship between vulnerability and truth and power. When Gus, Pointer, Mace shared their journey of identity, how they've come to understand themselves as white and non-binary and a lesbian, they said, I constantly make myself vulnerable in order to be heard. I was floored by that simple poignancy that in their vulnerability is their power, the power of truth that comes from exposing tenderness. We each have a role to play in this boat, an oar to pull, but sometimes that role switches. And I was delighted to watch as our youth moved into leadership. Last week, the 7th generation of our church taking that phone and saying, my turn. Our boat is full of examples of moving into the right role at the right moment. Today, one of our scheduled singers in the band was sick, so our lovely choral scholar stepped in at the last minute. Thank you so much. Next week, our religious education coordinator is going to be at a doula training, so one of our youth will be sharing the story for all ages. And today, Pat McFarland shared her stewardship testimonial with you all. She was one of the many people who said yes when the pledge team called, inviting you to say yes today too. In this congregation, we journey together. We are all in this boat, and it goes through all of life's transitions. It goes through the burgeoning joy of new life and new leadership, and it goes through the pain of death and loss. Those realities are held together in the very timber of the boat. It's a hard thing to light the candle of life for 2 of our members in 1 week. And as Phil and Betty both began journeying towards death this week, I watched as our members moved into position, sitting down to row in our places. Ministers and pastoral care associates and those close to the dying doing their work as they always do when death comes around. And because Phil was also the husband of our director of administration, other leaders moved into place as well. Our board and our treasurer and our finance committee and other staff members all moved into position, ready to do whatever was needed so Jean could step away from her leadership role and just be with her husband. This is what it means to be a community, to be there for one another, willing to pull in our place through the whole range of life experiences. In that LGBTQ bookstore in Chicago, where the frantic feeling, non-crisis trained staff member was trying to talk that caller off the ledge of self-harm, and that 50-year-old lesbian customer walked up and said, "My turn," and took the phone from him. After she did that, a line formed behind her. Every customer in that store got in line to take their turn. They knew that call. They knew that feeling, and one by one, each of them took a turn at the phone. We need one another. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and we are afraid. We need one another when we are in despair, temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone. We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs, and we need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. And as this reading from George Orwell says, we need one another when we have come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. This boat we are sailing in saves people's lives. It holds our people in care at the end of their lives, and it carries their loved ones on. It transforms us on this journey. This is not a casual faith. This is not just a place we come to on Sunday mornings. We are here for one another's lives. And our work is not simply to steward this ship for today, but it is to keep it healthy and thriving for all the travelers yet to come. Reverend Mackenzie writes, "The ship is also placed above our heads in the church to remind us of another truth. We are not at the helm. This ship we share is guided by the divine, by God, by the mystery, by the spirit of love and life, by something larger than your or my efforts. It's our work as human beings to pull in rhythm with what is good and just and grace-filled in this world. This is our work. This is what we are meant to do together. So, fellow travelers, look around. See who is with you on the journey. And then row. We are at the close of our pledge drive today, and so we have a ritual of invitation asking you to make a commitment to this community and steward the ship together. Everyone at every pledge level, including waivers, is invited to participate in this stewardship celebration ritual by coming forward, and you see we have baskets here, placing your pledge cards in the baskets. If you have already turned in your pledge card, good for you! You can pick up a duplicate pledge card, there are some at the ends of your rows there to use in the ceremony. You can just write duplicate on the top of it. If walking down the aisle to the baskets today isn't going to work for you, please just raise your hand and an usher will come and pick up your pledge card and drop it in the basket for you. And anyone who is here today as a guest, welcome. We invite you to just witness this ritual of our commitment to our community. And as a warning, one of my very first Sundays as a Unitarian Universalist was on Pledge Drive Sunday, so you never know, guest, where you might end up. As we begin our stewardship celebration ritual, I'd like to invite you during the practice to consider what this moving body of people means to you. Why are you in this boat? And why does this boat matter? How is the moving line of people coming forward and saying, my turn, connected to all of those who came before you and will come after? When you are ready, please rise and come forward with your pledge cards. Let us make our commitments to this community together. Printed in your orders of service. This is adapted from the essay by Clarissa Pinkola Estes regarding awakened souls in stormy times. I'll begin. I grew up on the Great Lakes and recognize a seaworthy vessel when I see one.
There have never been more able crafts in waters than there are right now.
And they are fully provisioned and able to signal one another, look out over the prow.
There are millions of boats of righteous souls on the waters with you.
In a storm, display the lantern of the soul.
Soul on deck shines like gold in dark times.
Struggling souls catch light from others who are fully lit.
And willing to show it.
Even though your veneers may shiver from every wave in this stormy roil,
The long timbers composing your prow and rudder come from the greater forest.
that long-grained lumber is known to withstand storms, to hold together, to hold its own.
And to advance regardless.
When a great ship is in harbor and moored, it is safe.
But that is not what great ships are built for.
Will you join us in singing our closing hymn in our teal hymnal number 1064, Blue Boat Home?